Hi guys and welcome back to Tale Talk. Just a few hours ago Hytale released a new blog post, this time about Worldgen. And of course I've got you covered. Okay, so this blog post actually got me very excited. Minecraft's Worldgen never was very good, so getting to see how Hytale tackles that is surely a great relief. Last time I got a blog post, I read all of it to you, but this time a lot of the blog posts are actually images, which is great because it leaves more room for speculation. So without further ado, let's hop into it. Unfortunately, the blog post only covers the Orbis dimension, which, if you don't know, is one of the 5 dimensions you can visit in Hytale. Still, we get a lot of variety here. Now, let's take a look at the first image. Now, what we can see here is that the Orbis dimension consists out of 6 zones, out of which 2 are still unannounced. However, if we take a look at the concept art for the Altverses, we get to see a jungle and a big ocean. So, are these the 2 extra zones? I don't know. For the ocean, maybe. For the jungle? Probably. At least if it actually is a jungle. Now, my first question here is, how are these zones arranged? In the Altverses concept art, we get to see them like countries, but that would imply that the world is not infinite. Which, when I remember correctly, isn't something the devs talked about. So then, is there an end of the world? Or will the Worldgen take place on a sphere? As cool as I think a sphere would be, I still prefer a near infinite world. Okay, let's take a closer look at Zone 1. Apparently, we are looking at a lot of flatland combined with a few mountains, some woodlands and rivers. We also get a lot of irregular caves, as well as some dungeons. Zone 2 is a lot more arid, with a lot of canyons, deserts and an oasis here and there. Caves are here a lot more straight, and seem to contain like crystals or something like that. Maybe they are even formed by creatures. Zone 3 seemed to be a cold area, with high mountains, snow on trees, colder woodlands and icy lakes. Maybe they even glaciers in place. The caves seem to be very icy too, and the deepest caves also contain no lava. In Zone 4 we get lava on the surface, canyon-like mountains, volcanoes and even rivers of lava. While the first few caves also contain something of that, when going deeper we actually can see trees, lakes and even a jungle down there. And to me, that looks exactly like the concept art we got, which showed the cave system. Now, what we get out here is that the cave system we saw there seemed to only apply to Zone 4, with other zones having very different things in place. Okay, so what we got next here is an actual in-game screenshot of Zone 1. A lot of trees, flatland, lakes, rivers, and so on. To me it looks nice, but not shockingly good. The color palette, however, is very good chosen and fits really good. So we also have some small mountains here and there, and some generated structures. So unlike Minecraft, the biomes don't seem to be like disconnected from each other. I mean, some have clear lines, but oftentimes they just blend into each other. Also what they wrote could mean that topographical features, like mountains, are disconnected from biomes, but I'm not sure on that. Also, they call the generated structures points of interest, so let's just call them that like that. Next up, there's a screenshot that is taken out of Zone 3. And no, that isn't Zone 3, clashing with Zone 1. Mountains are certainly higher, and it looks like we got an aurora here. We also see some very subtle light shafts at the trees in the back, where the sun shines through, which, especially in those scenes, really can give a lot of character to the shot. Next up, we got to know that each zone has their own set of blocks, which fit the atmosphere. Now, it will be interesting to see whether they're just cosmetic or affect gameplay, and whether the blocks will change appearance depending on the zone you are in, or if you can change the block manually. Of course, each zone also has their NPC races, creatures, critters, plant lives, weather and geology. Okay, now we're coming to coastal areas and deep ocean. In the beginning I said that the deep ocean may be its own zone, but they kinda said that it isn't, but they don't make it very clear. In the first screenshot here we get a really beautiful shot of a Zone 3 coast. Now, the real beauty here is that we don't get just strand, but also a lot of variety on it. Some parts are green and have grass, some have big and small rocks, and a lot of things just randomly distributed. After that, we get a screenshot of Zone 2 and a coast, and it looks like we get really high cliffs here. A bit less variety here, but maybe some detail blends out at a certain distance. I surely hope so, because some parts look a bit empty. Now, the ocean doesn't only consist out of coasts. We actually get real ocean here, with a lot of structures underwater. And I don't know if I'm taking this sentence too literal, but are they really talking about waves here? Okay, anyways, if you travel far enough into the ocean, you will at some point get to the ocean shell, which is a sudden drop-off at the edge of the zone, leading you in the deep ocean. This then essentially is its own zone, with a lot of things to explore here. Now, my question here is, did they swap up the caves here for the ocean, so that we get an ocean that is actually deep, like 400 to 1000 blocks, with no caves at the bottom? That would be cool. Oh, and actually I have something that clears up a question I had before, but apparently the 4 zones are just where the storyline takes place. After that, there's something called the Infinite Lands, which is, as the name suggests, something for you to explore when you run out of lands in the main storyline. Essentially, that means that we can't have a sphere, but something more like this, where here in the middle we have the 6 zones, then surrounding them the deep ocean, and then after that the Infinite Lands, which we don't know anything about. They may resemble all the zones together, just procedurally generated. Maybe they contain ocean, we simply don't know. Okay, next up are the generated caves and dungeons. These are, as I already said, different in each zone. However, there are some key principles that apply to all of them. Caves are fully procedurally generated. That means that no cave will look like the other, because they are generated based on rules that are different from each zone and dependent on the terrain. These caves include creatures and will be an important source for resources. The dungeons are somewhat different, as they, if I interpret that correctly, are not generated procedurally, but have pre-built sections that are being put together like building bricks. With that, dungeons should be different each time. However, there will be some areas that you'll recognize from other ones. Dungeons consist out of multiple chambers that are connected by passages, and oftentimes there's also a final room that provides an extra challenge. What we see here in this image is an example of a dungeon, which starts at the top in the tower, and then has multiple passages, and then in the end there's a big final room, possibly for a boss challenge. Okay, so next thing up are the prefabs. It may not sound like much, but this is actually an area where Minecraft was really bad. Prefabs are basically pre-built structures that are not procedurally generated at all. That means that they are exactly the same every time you encounter them. Now, on the one hand, that of course means less variety, but on the other hand, prefabs oftentimes look much better than the generated ones. Prefabs of course can be, like in this image, buildings, but also assets for nature. So far, Hytale contains 3,785 prefabs, and from looking at this image, it's looking like a large percentile of this are made to improve variety in nature. And in my opinion, this is a very good thing. Obviously, we will be able to create these ourselves, at least when we get modding support, and you will be able to attach triggers and events to them, which opens up for a lot of possibilities. For example, you may be able to build a fully working spaceship using scripting, and then put it in a blueprint, and paste it anywhere and it works. So it will be interesting to see how it plays out. Okay, so coming to the next section, portal dungeons. These are somewhat different from other dungeons, as you enter them through a portal that you find on the surface or in the underground. Portals can, but don't have to lead in another dimension, and can look different every time. They didn't say much about it, but what we see here may be similar to a Minecraft mod called Dimensional Doors, just with a lot more variety. As an example, they provided a dungeon called the Temple of Gaia. These are floating islands in space, and we actually get a glimpse of it in the trailer, where the player is in the Garden of Elements and is supposed to help the Quebecs defeat the golem. Now, when looking at concept and reality, they do look very similar, and when looking at the concept, we now also know how the golem is called, as he is a corrupted golem. Now, I know this scene is probably cherry-picked, but if more dungeons look like this, Hytale will be gorgeous. And for me, I don't really care about the RPG aspect, but from what we see so far, even I get excited about this. Oh, and the thing I forgot to mention. Dungeons you enter through portals are fully handmade and have their own rules and terrain, so you'll be limited in what you can do and break. Okay, so the last thing we get to see in the block is called Happy Little Accidents. Now, when building a procedural world generation, bad things will happen. In Minecraft, we got floating sand islands that became a trap when you hit them, and for example Elite Dangerous had planets colliding, which certainly is not what reality should be, but oftentimes they look cool, and when they're not as frequent as in Minecraft, they can be refreshing instead of annoying. Now, I don't know exactly what in this image is wrong, but it seems like an oasis collided with a canyon and got a little stretched out. Maybe it is also the bridge, but to be honest, I don't see anything wrong with this image. Okay, so in the next image, it's pretty obvious. We got a prefab that is affected by this ravine. Now, in Minecraft, we had this sometimes with villages, where one part was on a mountain and the other part on the ground, or just one house that was on a cliff and then had about 50 blocks of support on it, with a door leading to death. Now, when reading this text here, they're giving some very specific examples. They say that they encountered rivers that carved their way through mountains and dungeons that had been split in half by ravines, or swampy terrain that continued on a mountain. From what they say, it seems like they're trying to sell bugs as a features, which in this case may even work, as they provide a lot of content for funny moments. Just make sure that they don't break gameplay. Okay, just one very last thing here. Now, it's not even new, but it's in the blog, so let's go over it. Now, in specific, they're talking about biomes, zones and worlds in context of modding. Obviously, we will be able to create our own. Now, what is a little bit special about this, is that we get actual configuration files that define these zones and biomes. Now, I said that we already know this because the devs already confirmed that we would get all the tools they use, so it's not a real surprise. With configuration files, however, an average human being might be able to create their own biomes, and while it may not make a huge difference for modders, it may make a huge difference for you, as you may be able to create your own biome without relying on other ones. And I surely can't wait to see the moddability of this game in action. Maybe we get to see some form of preview for that, because I already talked to some server owners that wanted to use Hytale instead of Minecraft. And having servers available at launch may give this game a huge boost. So maybe for a selected group of people, they could give it preview access, but I don't know. What did you think about the new blog post? Did you find it as interesting as I did? Let me know down in the comments below. By the way, Hytale already said that they want to do these blog posts weekly, so the content flow should be a little bit better with that. If you like my content and want to stay up to date on Hytale, be sure to get subscribed, as I will post updates on every blog post they release. You can also follow me on Twitter or join my Discord server. You can find the links for that in the description below. I'll see you in the next video, and until then, keep talking and Tale Talk out.